And the power behind touch and tell is that by creating that playful and vulnerable environment, you give your brain an opportunity to release oxytocin, which is that love drug, which creates that power. So it's not just a fun date night, though it is that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like tricking people into working on their relationship because they're having so much fun doing it. And you don't even realize the impact that it's having on your brain chemistry, that it's really forming that love connection. To say, oh, I already know my partner is really to discredit the changes in the dynamic of your partner. I mean, they are an ever evolving creature that you need to continue to learn and discover. And it's exciting and new. Relationships should never become stagnant because people aren't stagnant.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Mom Does It All. If you're looking for encouragement, empowerment, and uplifting in motherhood and mompreneurship, this is the show for you. I'm your host, Marta Spurk, triplet mom, certified success coach, and all things motivation extraordinaire. In this episode, I talked to Janae Andrus, connection expert and the creator of Touch and Tell, a card game for couples. She talks about her journey into creating the game and all the benefits and science behind it to develop a greater bond between you and your partner. Let's get right to it. Hi, Janae. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so excited. So a little bit of a background story. I met Janae at this entrepreneurial conference that I have been talking about lately, how amazing it was. And she was one of the people that I connected the most with when we did the exercises of like figuring out what our businesses are and how we could help each other. Because even though it's not a focus so much on moms necessarily, it's a focus on relationships. And it's very aligned with what I talk about in terms of mindset and communication and all of that. So I'm super excited that you're here to talk about this game that you developed. But before even you explaining what the game is, I would love for you to share how you got into this, how you started developing this and became a CEO of this amazing product.
Sure. So Touch and Tell, it's all about connection. And so I've become a connection expert over the years. So actually, my background is, my degree is in political science, which doesn't fit at all, right? Although certainly all of our experiences, although different, will feed us in different ways. But my degree is in political science. And then I married very young. And then I spent 8 years in a marriage with someone who just did not want to connect, would not connect no matter what. And so over that 8 years, I became absolutely a connection expert. If there's a game I've played it, a book I've read it, a therapist, I've been to them, all of the things. And it's amazing what we become good at when we face something that we can't have that we want or that we struggle with. And so I quickly became an expert, but certainly didn't see it in that way at the time. And then since then, my career's developed in marketing and operations for small businesses. And I've grown small businesses for other people over the last few years. But several years ago, I was on a date with a guy who just asked me a whole bunch of insightful questions and he had a British accent. So I wanted to impress him. And I thought, what can I do to come up with a creative date? And so I jotted down a few conversation starters on cards and thought, what if I make it a little more dynamic and add some touches like, oh, hold their hand while you tell them this story about your grandparent or, whatever else. Or instead of just sharing, what's a gift you really appreciated receiving, sit on their lap while you tell them about that gift, kind of like Santa, and so came up with some fun ideas, wrote out 20 cards in Sharpie on some index cards. And we did that for our third date and we had a blast. And he had a roommate who was staying with him at the time. And he goes, hey, can I borrow that to, play with my wife when she's back in town? And so people started borrowing it over and over on. And I thought, this really has power behind it. And I actually started talking with a psychologist who's also a marriage therapist and is now a worldwide keynote speaker and an author. And I said, can you just look at my cards? And he goes, there is so much power in these. And we got to talking and he got excited about it. And he's actually endorsed the product since.
Oh, wow.
And I developed 250 cards where each one tells you how to touch and what to tell. And the power behind Touch and Tell is that by creating that playful and vulnerable environment, you give your brain an opportunity to release oxytocin, which is that love drug, which creates that power. So it's not just a fun date night, though it is that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like tricking people into working on their relationship because they're having so much fun doing it. And you don't even realize the impact that it's having on your brain chemistry, that it's really forming that love connection. You know, we think so often that relationships are just this, you know, fog of emotion and we just kind of hope it works, but we can be so intentional and purposeful about the choices we make in our relationships to grow that connection. And so when you play Touch and Tell, it gives you that opportunity to break out of your patterns and not just sit on the couch and watch Netflix one more night, but to have a purposeful experience. Right? I know. It's what we all do.
Oh, I love that so much, especially because, you know, in my world, I focus so much on moms starting this introspective work of journaling and what you're going to write about your feelings. And this is just as important when you're dealing with somebody else in a relationship. How are you feeling? What's going on? You don't even take the time to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. There's no guidance, right? And that's why usually people will just go to counseling because then there's someone out there to kind of referee the whole situation and mediate. And so I love that it's very playful because, and like you said, you were tricking the couple into having a deeper conversation that they normally wouldn't have unless they actually went to counseling. And I know lots of people just avoid it because it's uncomfortable. And
there's a stigma behind therapy, unfortunately. There shouldn't be, but there is. And you feel almost branded as a couple if you've been to marriage therapy. Which, you know, it's like preventative health, right? It matters, but we're better at taking medicine or about painkillers than we are about taking vitamins, right?
Yes, unfortunately. So. And I love that this is just, you know, a fun idea because whenever you make something fun, it's a lot easier to incorporate in your day to day. And so how did you come about developing so many more cards? Because it started out with some,
started with 20 and we landed on 250.
I know. So what was this process like? I want to know, like, from not having anything. So I love the idea. I love the story. And now entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial journey, like, okay, I'm actually going to launch this thing. Like, what was the process? Oh,
it was so fun. Coming up with the content, do you know, when you find your strength and your niche, it flows out of you, you know? And I think I had underestimated the power that I had developed over those 8 years of becoming an expert at connection and understanding how to work with people and what they need. And there are a lot of different and fun dynamic cards in there. Some of my favorite cards were developed toward the end. And it was actually really funny in sort of the field testing and development process. I remember calling a friend one night. I was home alone and I just needed to test out a couple of cards. And I called her up and I said, hey, can you come over? I want to test a couple of cards on you and whatever. And she goes, did you just call me at 10 o'clock at night to ask me to come over so you can touch me? And I said,
oh
yes.
My gosh. Yes. That's hilarious.
It was pretty funny. And of course, all the touches in the game are it's not a sexual game as you've experienced. You've played it.
Yes, I have.
But it creates an emotional intimacy and it's a ton of fun. I actually do have a more intimate version of the game coming out as well.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Spice things up.
Yeah, you know, and it's just a wider range of touches for those couples who are more comfortable with that. But this one is, you know, something you should feel comfortable, you know, giving your daughter-in-law as a gift. It's
right. It's not R-rated or anything.
It's not at all. It's a ton of fun. So developing it was really a journey. And I was thinking just the other day, you know, it was about 1.5 years ago that I was just sitting on my living room floor, Googling, how do you produce a card game? I didn't know. I knew I had the content. I knew I had this incredible thing that could be powerful for couples, but I didn't know, you know, how to manufacture a game, how to run fulfillment, how to do all of these other elements.
Right.
And I think, particularly as moms, as women, we talk ourselves out of feeling qualified to do something. And so I just tackled it and I thought, well, I have the part that matters. And so I'm going to figure out the rest.
Right. You have the content. Everything else is just details. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it's all the little things you can find. You just start connecting with your network and start, you know, asking questions and finding ways to meet other people. You know, it's interesting when you think about starting a business versus becoming a mother, they're so similar.
Yes, very.
You don't go specifically to school to become a mother. There's no particular qualification or certification. Just become mothers.
Yeah.
But we research the heck out of it. We become experts. I mean, you could probably ask any mom what baby products have been recalled in the last 12 months. And we know, just know.
Yes.
We develop these superpowers. Becoming a business owner is so similar. You know, you dive in, you research, you qualify yourself. And you learn, and you become an expert. You haul and you figure it out.
Yes.
There's a lot of power in that, and we can qualify ourselves when we work really hard and pour our whole hearts into it.
Yes. And one of the things that we were talking about off air that I loved about you was you mentioning how sometimes when you start a business idea, you may get a little frustrated with having kids and not being able to take it as further as you would have want if you didn't have kids, and just finding that balance, which I hate that word. And I always say how I hate it because it doesn't exist, but just figuring out a way of juggle the two things or the many things and not feel guilty or find like you are being responsible and productive with both things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. You know, having kids can easily feel like a hurdle that you have to almost overcome. But really, your children are a strength. And when you can view it in that way and draw strength from them, besides just the fact that, you know, providing for them and caring for them and setting that example should be such a strong motivator. There's a lot of strength we draw just from the experiences that we've had as mothers. You know, I can tell you that some of my greatest strengths have come from just the refining fire of becoming a mother. You know, it took me, it was very difficult for me to get pregnant, to keep pregnancies, to birth babies. Very, very difficult journey for me. And, you know, I'll just share with you, I had an experience birthing my last child. And I was in triage, the dreaded triage. It's a horrible place. And I'd been in labor about 10 hours at this point. Wow. Still had a very long way to go. And a nurse, Shelby, kind of grabbed me and she said, "What do you do when you have a contraction? What do you do in your mind?" And I'd studied mindfulness. I'd done all these things, but at that point I wasn't thinking about that.
Right.
And so she asked me, what are you doing in your mind every time a contraction comes? And I said, "I don't know. I just panic." And she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, "You can't do that. You won't make it." And that stuck with me. And that was my moment of realizing, oh, I need to be purposeful and intentional. And I need to be really good about getting through these contractions and focusing. And I cannot tell you how many times that phrase is stuck in my mind as I've gone through my business. And I have faced something that I didn't know how to face and it seemed scary, or there was a manufacturing issue, or the fulfillment center called and said, "Hey, we're having a shipping problem." And I just wanted to panic. And I hear that nurse Shelby in my mind going, "You can't do that. You won't make it." And I go, yeah. And so that birth experience and that, you know, reality check moment for me of realizing I need to harness my strength and steer this ship, because I am the CEO of this company and no one's going to do it if I don't do it.
Yes.
And the same way that we find ways as mothers to say, I am the mother. If I don't do it, it doesn't get done. And we find power we didn't have. We realize our 100% is more than we thought.
Yes. Oh, that's so powerful. I love that so much. And what an awesome story to carry through. And even if somebody hasn't experienced something like that, that's just such a beautiful message of you can't do that. You can't just panic. And I love the connection even with relationships, which goes back to what you said in the beginning of we have a relationship, you know, we get married or we're in a relationship and we just feel like it's this fog of emotions and let's, you know, throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks, like whatever, let's wing this.
Such a common mistake. Yes.
Right. And we do that with everything in life for the most part, like with motherhood, with our businesses. And sometimes, you know, it's trial and error. You're trying to figure things out. It's not like you're going to have everything right.
Yeah. You've got to take a step in the dark.
Exactly. It's just, you know, taking the leap and risk and taking risks. But at the same time, you have to be mindful. You have to be intentional and realize that you do have a say and you have a power to create that. And so that's the whole message of the game too, is being intentional.
Oh, absolutely. Mindful. You know, that reminds me, I saw a thread on Facebook the other day. This woman, and I just have to tell you this story. This woman posted and said, "Hey guys, how do you cope with disappointment on Mother's Day?" And I think we can all relate to that, maybe feeling a little disappointed, like people didn't quite meet our expectations. On the day that we're supposed to be the queens, right? And she said, "How do you cope with disappointment on Mother's Day? You know, I sent my husband a link to this thing I wanted as a gift. It was $30. It's not expensive. And he let me down. He didn't buy it. What do I do?" And 90% of the comments on that thread, and there were hundreds of comments, 90% of them were women telling her, you need to lower your expectations or you need to not have expectations. I was horrified by that. I was upset. I looked at it and thought, this is a terrible message that because someone lets us down, we should just expect less.
Right.
Absolutely not. We should have expectations in our relationships and in our lives. When you have an expectation, you communicate it. You communicate your reasonable expectations. It doesn't mean people won't let you down.
Right.
Also doesn't mean you should back off.
Right.
Because someone has let you down, that doesn't mean that you now have to scramble and do the emotional work to make up for their deficit. Continue to hold those reasonable expectations and you say, hey, you've let me down. This is, again, what I had expected. And now here's my expectation. I could use a nice date night out as a makeup, or I would like to know next year is going to be different, but you did let me down. And you keep holding your ground and knowing what you expect. You don't change it and scramble because they've dropped the ball. And that's exactly kind of the concept of touch and tell, of two people coming together, finding that connection, holding their own purpose.
Right.
And I absolutely love the stories I get from couples of how they've found ways to connect and learn more about each other. It's so much fun. And one of my favorite experiences was talking to a girl who said, I've been married 15 years. And I just don't think I need this game. I know my husband so well. And I said, okay, draw a card. And so she drew a card, and it was a card about what men think of fingernails, or not men, but your partner. So ask your partner what they think of women's fingernails and how they should be.